Hello, this is Darren DePaul, the voice of Emperor Valkorion, and you're watching another video by Vulkk.
Greetings everyone, this is the guide version for SWTOR Marauder CARNAGE Discipline in Patch 5.0. Again, I would like to show before you the full written version of my guide because I've spent a lot of time researching things and putting them all in very nice and neatly ordered written form of that guide. Since I didn't make one for 3.0 or for 4.0, I've spent a lot of time creating these ones. I actually have guides for all of the four favorite disciplines for my Sentinel and Marauder, that is Combat Carnage and Watchman Annihilation. The utility section is going to take the bigger part of this video, and it is exactly the same as the Annihilation, because both Annihilation and Carnage disciplines have pretty much the same benefit from the same builds in your utility section. Starting up with ability priorities, I want to very briefly show you in game actually the ability priorities. And we have different setups for single target and AoE. Let me switch to the training dummy and I will show you my Carnage Marauder, whose stats are very, very far from what they should be because my gear is all over the place, spread across my other characters with legacy stuff. But that's not the point. The abilities that I would like to show you is, first and foremost, everything for the Carnage Marauder comes from everything in terms of big DPS comes from ferocity. Under these 3 seconds of ferocity where your armor penetration is increased by 100%, you need to chime in or to include all of your biggest hitting abilities. The priority list goes as follows: Devastating Blast, Vicious Throw, Gore, and Dual Saber Throw. Let's not forget Ravage. So if you actually have to prioritize them, you need to give biggest priority to Devastating Blast, Vicious Throw, then Ravage, and then finally Gore. Why is Gore not having bigger priority when it actually deals a huge amount of damage? It's because it costs 3 rage. Damage versus rage versus resource cost is actually a very important thing when you're calculating your resource management for a longer fight, because pretty much no fight in, well, sometimes in PvP, yes, but most of the cases in PvE and in PvP as well, the fights don't end with one full cycle of your ability. So you have to pay attention to what your resource is, your rage bar. For single target priority list, we've already explained. For AoE environments, you want to have Dual Saber Throw and then immediately click Ferocity. This is called clipping. It's explained in better detail in the written form of the guide, which is actually linked down below in the description if you can't find it. So you quickly use Dual Saber Throw, then activate Ferocity and go immediately with Sweeping Slash. For Sweeping Slash, you definitely want to have Path Carver because this is the best buff for any kind of AoE environment, and it is explained in the second part of this video, which is the utility section discussion. Let me demonstrate it quickly for you. Depending on your latency and depending on your quick reactions, you might actually sometimes struggle to fit in all of the required abilities under the ferocity. Be mindful that you should aim to use as many ferocity windows in conjunction with the 30 stacks of fury turned into berserk. So then when you have berserk, I need to build up some rage first. We go with Dual Saber Throw, then ferocity very quickly, and then Devastating Blast. And before my buffs go out, this is basically one of the best burst situations that you can have for single target. Because of the delay from Dual Saber Throw and Vicious Throw, they are primarily to be used right before Ferocity. So if you use Dual Saber Throw and right away click Ferocity, Ferocity doesn't obey the global cooldown in the game, so it can be used right away after the Dual Saber Throw and Vicious Throw. And due to the delay between using those two abilities and the damage applied to your target, they actually fall under the effect of ferocity. That's why you want, in AoE environments, you want saber throw and then quickly ferocity, and then go with AoE smash, AoE sweeping slash smashing button. Do not use smash because it deals less damage, unless of course you have a huge amount of enemies all over you. You might want to include smash, especially when your dual saber throw is on cooldown. You might actually use smash and then go immediately with sweeping slash spams again. This is really important, again, for PvP and PV, for single and for AoE situations. You want to use as many of your berserk moments with conjunction of with ferocity. So when you have berserk active, it actually allows you to fit in an extra ability under the ferocity. So I can actually use 3 sweeping slashes. That again depends on your build. And for stat priorities, I will have to refer you back to this section of the guide, which is right here. With low amount of alacrity, you will struggle to perform all of the combos explained in the guide here. You need at least 14 or 15% alacrity, if I'm not mistaken, with a decent latency on your server, something between, let's say, 60 and 150, to be able to perform these things. Unfortunately, Carnage and Combat heavily depend on these, so that's a big problem for some players, especially for, let's say, Australians who play on the US servers, because the Australian servers have been closed many years ago. They are forced to play, or you're forced to play if you're an Australian player, with a very high latency, and Carnage Combat Discipline is really tricky sometimes. Now let's jump to the utility section, which, as I've mentioned earlier, is exactly the same for both Carnage and Annihilation. So if you're watching both of the videos, don't be alarmed. Yes, I'm using the same recording. In terms of utilities, now let me reset this, because again, they are experimental from whatever I've been doing in the previous gameplay session for my Marauder. We start with the utilities, which are pretty much the same, bear the same importance, or have the same importance for both of the specs that you would find guides about on my website and on my YouTube channel, Carnage and Annihilation. There is a very, very small difference in maybe a couple of utilities that benefit more one of the two specs, but you should really consider the utility builds unique and valid for both specs. Starting with the Cloak of Carnage, one of the most important utilities that I usually keep on all of the time. We then go to Inexorable. I apologize for reading names wrong. This is something I like doing and I can't really escape it. Primarily a PvP boost. You generate 4 rage when stunned, immobilized, put to sleep, or knocked around, and so on and so on. Path Carver is a must-have for AoE environments. You can actually afford to use it in a general kind of utility build, but that depends, of course, what you're doing. Really, really good for AoE situations where you want to use Sweeping Slash in conjunction with your dots. Moving on to Cloak of Rage, a very good combination with Cloak of Carnage. I usually keep both of these active at the same time, and they are kind of my must-have utilities on all kinds of builds. Brazen increases your damage reduction by 2%, and you build 2 Fury when attacked. This Fury building effect cannot occur more than once every global cooldown. Brazen is another must-have utility, but it actually depends on what you're doing and how much damage you're taking. If you're not taking any damage, you're not building Fury quick, so that depends on the boss encounter. Of course, it's kind of a must-have for PvP. But then again, we have so many other utilities good for PvP that the choice is actually hard sometimes. Overwhelm gives a boost to your Ravage, and it immobilizes the target for 3 seconds. Only ever useful for PvP. I personally never take it in any situation. When you spend 3 points in Skillful, you will be able to use Masterful Utilities. We start with Interceptor, Force Charge, Force Rend, Devastating Blast, and Obliterate. Snare the target, reducing its movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds. Only ever useful in PvP and quite nice actually for chasing healers, for example. Subjugation reduces the cooldown of Obfuscate by 15 seconds and increases its range by 6 meters. In addition, the cooldown of Disruption is reduced by 2 seconds, and Cloak of Pain can be used while stunned. Situational ability has its uses in both PvP and PvE, primarily for PvP. I personally very rarely take it on. Phantom increases your movement speed by 50% and the movement speed bonus of force camouflage by 20%. Additionally, it increases the duration of force camouflage by 2 seconds. It's one of the better utilities, if not the must-have, for PvP, very situational in PvE environment. Defensive throw reduces the damage taken from area effects by 30% and increases the internal and elemental damage reduction by 3%. In those very rare occasions where you don't care about incoming damage on your character or damage taken by your character, you can scratch that ability. In pretty much any other case, which is the majority of gameplay situations in the game, you want to have defensive throw in your build. Strangulate reduces the cooldown of Force Choke by 15 seconds. I very rarely use it. You can actually combine it with Ruthless Aggressor, which is one of the new utilities, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So this is a very situational. I usually don't use Strangulate. Relentless. Predation no longer requires or consumes Fury, but it will go on cooldown for 30 seconds when activated. Since for pretty much any spec of the Marauder, Berserk is the primarily used buff when it comes to the 30 stacks of Fury. Predation is really useful to be not dependent on the Fury stacks, because many of the boss fights and PvP as well benefits your gameplay from having an extra speed run boost. When you spend more points, when you spend 4 points in total, you unlock the heroic utilities. We start with Unbound. When Predation is applied or refreshed, it purges movement impairing effects. Additionally, the movement speed bonus of Predation is increased by 30%. Very situational. Usually not an ability. I take pretty much all of the utilities, not abilities, from the heroic module or section. I understand them as very situational. I accept them as very situational, and I don't recommend them to have any of them in your all-purposes build. Why? Let's talk about that. Maiming Reach increases the range of Crippling Slash to 10 meters. Additionally, Crippling Slash now consumes 2 less rage and immobilizes the target for 3 seconds. This immobilizing effect can be applied to the same target, cannot be applied to the same target more than once every 10 seconds. And Crippling Slash is an extremely useful ability for PvP. This is one of the most important utilities for PvP environments, be it solo PvP, roaming in the open world, if anybody still does that, or in war zones and arenas. Brooding reduces the cooldown of Intimidating Roar by 15 seconds. In addition, you build up to 30 Fury over the course of using Channel Hatred. This effect can happen only once every 30 seconds. Very situational, good for preparational moments before you start parsing and bashing the dummy, for example, or kind of useful for some specific boss fights. I personally like that utility for PvP as well, but unfortunately it's not always useful. It depends on the pace of the war zone or the arena. It's almost never useful in the arena. Cloak of Annihilation each use of Assault, Battering Assault, and Crippling Slash reduces the active cooldown of Cloak of Pain by 3 seconds. Well, Cloak of Pain is only on a 1 minute cooldown, and it is both defensive and offensive buff for yourself, and lowering its cooldown is actually beneficial because you already have, in most cases, as I've told you, Cloak of Carnage and Cloak of Rage. So considering, where the hell was it? Considering having Cloak of Annihilation, if you can afford the points, might actually be a good choice, depending again on what you are doing. Still though, be aware that Cloak of Pain is supposed to be defensive ability. It does have offensive boost, but it's very minor. It's still a boost though. Next we move on to Undying. Increases the duration of Undying Rage by 2 seconds and reduces its cooldown by 30 seconds. Undying Rage is extremely situational. I personally don't recommend this in PvP because 3 minutes cooldown lowered by 30 seconds is still a very long cooldown, and you can't really rely on Undying Rage. However, in some boss encounters, It's really useful, and right away in my mind pops up the fight Master and Blaster, fourth boss encounter in the Ravager's operation. The last one from the heroic section is Expunging Camouflage. Force Camouflage removes all cleansable effects when activated. Very, very situational. Once again, extremely useful for boss fights such as the Underlurker, or as I prefer to call it, Underbugger, third boss in Temple of Sacrifice operation. Moving down to the last section, the legendary utilities. Through Victory, Mad Dash can be used while immobilized, purges movement impairing effects while activated, and deals 50% more damage. Additionally, the cooldown of Mad Dash is reduced by 10 seconds. Mad Dash is a relatively new ability, and it's very, very situational, interesting and cool to use in PvP because of its low cooldown. But I personally do not recommend you taking Through Victory for PvE environment almost anywhere. It's not really beneficial. Blood Ward. Activating Saber Ward grants immunity to stun, sleep, lift, and incapacitating effects for 6 seconds. And getting attacked while Saber Ward is active heals you for 3% of your maximum health. This healing effect cannot occur more than once every second. So, Saber Ward is actually a very powerful defensive ability, but the fact that it's on a 3 minutes cooldown means you will not benefit much from spending 1 point on Blood Ward. I do not recommend this utility. Maybe you can find uses for it, but it's very, very rare. Thirst for Rage. Bloodthirst generates 12 rage, which is the maximum amount of resource points you can have when activated, and you heal for 1% of your maximum health whenever you activate an ability that consumes rage. Extremely situational. I personally don't remember a single time when I've picked up Thirst for Rage and used it in any kind of gameplay. Interceptor. Force Charge grants Interceptor. It's actually one of the new utilities. Very good one. Allowing you to activate Force Charge a second time. Interloper lasts up to 7.5 seconds, and it's removed if Force Charge is reused. If Interloper is not used by the end of the duration, 7.5 seconds, Force Charge is placed on a 7.5 seconds cooldown. Additionally, Force Charge now builds to Fury. Really, really useful. I highly recommend it in all kinds of PvP and PvE environments. And since Force Charge is by default on 15 seconds cooldown, it says 14.6 because I have some alacrity in the current gear on my character right now. You really, really want to have that utility because it doesn't actually hurt Force Charge at all. You actually have a chance to use it twice instead of just once every 15 seconds. Moving down the line, the next one is Hidden Savagery. While Force Camouflage is active, you gain a charge of Hidden Savagery every half second. Each charge of Hidden Savagery increases the damage dealt by your next melee attack by 4%, and it stacks up to 12 charges and lasts for up to 6 seconds after exiting Force Camouflage. Extremely useful in some PvP environments where you actually need Force Camouflage for whatever cases. I don't see any use for that ability in PvE environments because you don't spend your time stealthed, right? That's not the role of the Marauder. The last one is called Ruthless Aggressor, very cool one and one of the new utilities as well. Vicious Throw refunds 2 rage when used on a target affected by your Obfuscate and can be used on any target affected by your Obfuscate, regardless of remaining health. Additionally, activating Obfuscate grants you Ruthless Aggressor, increasing your force and tech resistance by 75% for 6 seconds. So this utility is very situational, again, depending on what you do and how you play and what kind of enemy or enemies you have in front of you. But basically it benefits Force Throw, which is supposed to be right here, and Obfuscate, which is right here now. You can pause the video and read the descriptions of both of these abilities. Obfuscate is usually not very popular in PvE unless you have that utility. And as I've mentioned earlier, you can use it in conjunction with subjugation, because subjugation also deals with obfuscate. So if you have one of those, you might want to have the other one utility as well. And with this, I think it's time to wrap up the video. Thank you guys for enjoying it. Down below in the video description, you're going to find more and a lot of useful links for your CARNAGE Marauder, Combat Sentinel, and all the other versions of guides. See you next time. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Click the like button and help me out. Visit my website vulkk.com for daily videos and news. To help me improve and expand, consider becoming my patron with a small monthly pledge. And stay in touch by following me on Facebook and Twitter.